You starting hella late on the show. Hello, everyone. Good morning to most, good afternoon to others, and good evening to those across the pond. I'm Jason Miles, your host for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I apologize for our tardiness. It's my fault. We're having some technical issues in the background. Had to get those all resolved because once we brought the guest in, we wanted a nice, smooth transition. As I am very excited about the show today. But first, if you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, and if you like what you see, make sure to hit the notifications bell as we're constantly adding new episodes. You can watch the second installment of Revolutionary Reckoning this Thursday, where we'll debut our new intro to the show that our background super producer Quinn put together. So I'm excited for that. Thank you, Quinn, for putting together these great new intro and outros. They're really awesome. Also, this past Wednesday, we had another episode of Gaming Materialists, a leftist discussion of tabletop gaming. They launched their new look and lineup that they'll be doing with the show. That's the third Wednesday of every month. Also, if you guys are fans of the Call-In app, I was a guest on Marcus and Karthik's Revolutionary Tracks, where we discuss my upcoming Woodstock 99 essay that will be out in Sublation magazine this Monday. I should not forget to mention that this Wednesday will be our most popular of the TIR Presents shows, the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert. If you want to view it live and call in and comment, talk to Pascal. Tell him how you really feel. There's only one way. Become a patron. Not only will you be able to talk to Pascal, but you'll have unlimited access to the champagne room and movie night, which sadly I wasn't able to do for my birthday because my equipment didn't work. So take that. But for as little as $3 a month, you can be part of the TIR patron family. That being said, let me bring in the TIR crew. First and foremost, the man of the Mau Mau Hour, my co-host, my homie, my dog, the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy
Get it?
birthday.
What?
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Well,
I should
right.
get up so you guys can see these little ass shorts I'm wearing and pop my butt. No? That's not the hot look for summer? Okay. well, I would fit in with a lot of my neighbors. Little do you know. Also coming all the way live from one of the darkest parts of America, that would be the DC area. Only second to Baltimore. Chocolate City's resident mayor. He's the mayor of Chocolate City. I'm going to say that because his hair is fabulous. Once again, I have to let him know that I hate him and I hate his family for having good hairy ass jeans. Jamaican son of a bitch. Please welcome Marcus of the Left Flank Vets.
Whoa.
Look at him. Oh, so man.
What's up? What's
so
going on?
successful when you're beautiful.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes. As I sip from my coffee that I'm sure somebody spit in the heart of the empire.
If he looked like me, he did. Fucking pretty motherfucker. Spitting in your shit like Nino Brown.
Man, I need to watch that again.
Yes, yes, Marcus. You are the Christopher Williams of this show.
The 30th anniversary this year
Of Christopher Williams passing?
of New Jack City.
New Jack City.
I was like, do we celebrate Christopher Williams? It was the 30th anniversary of him fucking up Halle Berry.
Did he die? He didn't die, did he?
No, he's alive. He's alive.
Oh, okay.
Remember when he married Halle Berry?
He wasn't the one that married Halle Berry. Stop it.
Yeah. Or no, he dated her and he apparently hit her.
Well, you know who they blame. They said that Wesley's the one who caused her to be deaf in one ear.
I thought it was David Justice.
Justice Carter, Justice was married to her.
Yeah, but I thought he was the one that was like,
allegedly.
You don't listen.
Allegedly.
The word allegedly.
I'm not trying to start any rumors, any liability.
No. I never tell you about the time Halle Berry got at my younger brother in San Francisco.
She was trying to mack
He called me up because I didn't believe him. I was like, bullshit, pictures or it didn't happen. And he called up and he showed me a picture and I was like, oh my God, I think it's time for you to leave your wife and just cheat with 50-year-old Halle Berry. Like you have a pass. Yeah.
Dr. Claus said Christopher Williams and David Justice both denied those claims. In fact, it was Justice who implied Wesley Snipes. Wow.
Y'all just need to leave Halle alone. Speaking of Halle Berry, our resident Halle Berry, if she was from Brooklyn, the headless voice of reason, M. Tucson.
Hello, everyone. I call my brother son because he shine like one.
Oh, very New York.
MT, I want to first of all say thank you so much. You sent me like the sweetest birthday gift. I never get to open anything, and so I got to like open all this fun stuff you got. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I got your birthday gift too, man.
You did. I'm not going to say what you got, but
you told me you didn't get him anything. You lied.
I put a lot of thought into it.
Pascal was the first person to call me, so yes, thank you very much. Marcus didn't call me. You know why Marcus didn't call me? You want to know why? You want to know why Marcus didn't call me? Because he doesn't have Facebook. That's everybody's birthday count.
Did you call me on my birthday? Do you know when my birthday?
You know why I didn't call you? Not on Facebook.
Not on Facebook. You don't need to know. That's just one piece of information you can add to another
because you are
find where I live.
Lord, and you didn't go through the normal birthing
That
process.
is the real reason, isn't it, Marcus?
Wait, what's that?
Because you're a dark Sith Lord who did not go through the normal birthing process.
Marcus doesn't have a belly button.
That's me, Darth Vader, Kim Jong-un, we're all the same. We're all the same.
That's why Marcus is so smiley, because he's not on social media.
Because I don't have to poop.
We have to be honest about that. That's really why he's a happy camper. Also, I think I'll have the official announcement because we'll have the flyer will be up. But we're doing a TIR live show in LA October 23rd.
All right.
Will Pascal be there?
We have to see.
Wow,
We may have-
Pascal will be there. It'll be me in a Pascal suit.
Whoa.
This is Revolution in conjunction with Give Them an Argument. So we're going to have special guests, some fun topics. I'm excited for it. Musical guest T.I. No, T.I. will not be there, but it would be funny if T.I. was there. T.I. is not in the
Just
budget.
walking around.
IT isn't even the budget. Maybe we can get another member of Tiny's group, Escape.
I like Escape.
You would like Escape.
Shut up. I like the candy.
We don't know who the artist is, but Suge Knight will be the promoter. So
Suge Knight. I feel like Suge Knight's the promoter as we're negotiating with this fucking venue. This is how much you take, punk. Nothing, Phil. Okay.
Didn't T.I. get into a fight with a comedian recently? I feel like that's the last thing I remember about T.I. But
The last time I saw T.I., true story, a news story had came out about him saving someone's life. I'm not even trying to be funny. And later that day, as I was walking out of the Fox Theater in Atlanta on tour with Yo Gabba, I bumped into T.I. and his family, and they didn't have tickets to come see the second show. I think we did 2 or 3 shows that day. And as I was walking out, I saw T.I. and I was like, holy shit, it's T.I. And he's not a very tall man. And his whole family was like little people. And I was like, oh shit, hold on, let me get you in. And I ran into one of the tour promoters and I said, hey dude, T.I.'s outside with his family, man. Can I get some passes to get him in? And he goes, yeah, sure. Give him a backstage pass. We can get him backstage. I get pass, give the T.I. I escort him and his family in, get him some good seats and stuff. And then the promoter dude looks at me and he goes, oh man, is he in? I was like, yeah, he's in. That's him. He goes, who's T.I.?
Yeah. By the way,
who the fuck is T.I.? Yeah.
Rappers.
I met Kim Fields that day. She was there.
I feel like this might be actually a perfect intro into the story or into the interview,
I think that's
because
true.
you can just walk in somewhere and say, yeah,
Didn't those
this is
people
Little
use
Revy
the
right
White
here,
House?
right? And it's like I just point to Jason Miles and he's got tattoos and it's like, oh yeah, Little Revy.
Oh, Little
We should-
Revy.
We should give him free shit. Yes.
This is Little Revy.
You know who else did that? Paul Stanley did that in LA. Paul Stanley literally walked up to the people in LA and went, if you
Nice.
don't know who Paul Stanley is, he's the lead singer of Kiss. He went, come on.
Not the one with the tongue.
Not the one with the tongue. No.
That's Gene Simmons.
It's Gene Simmons. Paul Stanley is a lot nicer than Gene Simmons, but I did think that was the funniest thing ever when he went, hey, I want to be able to do that. Marcus, that's what I'm going to be able to do at every Barnes & Noble across America, every coffee shop, every boutique coffee shop in America. I want to be able to walk in and go, hey,
For the audio listeners.
Light
let them
foam.
know.
Yeah. Exactly.
light foam on that. Hey.
Hey.
But several of you might find today's guest and topic a bit mysterious, since the story of Laura Albert and JT LeRoy seem almost lost in history. Show business is filled with aspirational characters who attempt to achieve fame and fortune by faking it until they make it. But where does this wishful thinking end and full-on hoax begin? Today we're going to be speaking with Marjorie Strum. I've been saying her name
Sturm.
wrong.
How is that hard?
Sturm.
I was saying it wrong when I met her, because my eyes flip-flopped. They flim-flammed. And I was calling her Strum. And then Gene wrote it Strum originally. And it's like Sturm. Sturm.
Jason's like, I'm just a small bean with a learning disability. It's hard for me to say names.
The letters moved. I swear they moved.
How the hell you get the beans, Bud Franks?
God.
Longtime community advocate in the San Francisco Bay Area and documentary filmmaker and film teacher is coming on to tell us about her documentary she made about the fascinating tale of JT LeRoy and the literary hoax that fooled not just the literary community, but all of show business for almost 10 years. Please welcome, coming all the way live from my former home, San Francisco, California, Marjorie Strum.
You guys,
Marjorie,
great.
I know
Thank
you had to withstand the long pre-show banter that we do on this program. It's quite normal. I understand it can be quite disconcerting, but please, thank you for staying with us and holding on. We get a little silly on our Saturday shows. Jason had a birthday yesterday, so forgive us for keeping you in the
Happy
way.
birthday.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. You guys are really funny. I was enjoying.
This is a huge deal for me because I first heard about JT LeRoy randomly dicking around on Amazon, and I watched Laura Albert, who is the original writer of the book's documentary. My lady friend somehow found you on Twitter, and for some reason got you and Laura, because I didn't know Laura Albert's name actually till I talked to you, and you said it enough times where I was like, oh, her name is Laura Albert, not just crazy white lady. So meeting you via the internet, I found your documentary, which totally was like, because I was already kind of asking a lot of questions. So your documentary definitely answered all the questions that I had about the original story of JT LeRoy, because honestly, it is something that I don't really remember. The name sounded kind of familiar, but I mean, in the late 90s, who's really reading books anyway, right? Come on, we're watching Fear Factor, Jackass. Nobody really cares about books. That's for smart people. That being said, who is JT LeRoy?
Okay. Well, JT LeRoy is basically, oh my goodness, that's a big one. JT LeRoy was a 15-year-old street hustler, addicted to heroin, orphan, basically, who left his mother, was seriously abused. He came from like a Christian fundamentalist background, and he ended up writing these books that became bestsellers while he was homeless in the Tenderloin over a number of years. And then, these, like, an outreach worker found him and introduced him to a therapist, and his books were dedicated to a therapist, and they became bestsellers. So at first it was sort of like the literary community. His therapist introduced him to like a literary agent, and then the literary community got behind him, and then the healing community got behind him, and then the celebrity community got behind him. And he was too shy and seriously agoraphobic for many years, and then he finally came out and started making public appearances, and it went on for like 11 years until it stopped. It ended, and it was all basically a hoax.
Now, we have a character in our world, or had a character in our world named Amy Therese that had a slightly similar, there's an avatar of a person that says things on Twitter, and these things were controversial, right, and people would, get riled up behind it. And my first thing was, well, where's this person's show, or where can I find them and hear them? Like, oh, well, they don't really come out. I was like, oh, it's not a real person. So why do you care? And everyone would be like, no, I was like, it's not a real person. In 2022, anyone Everyone wants to be famous, and it's really easy to be famous. No one's going to sit behind a keyboard and Twitter and hide and not show their face. There's numerous shows that we talk about behind the scenes of people that have tried to monetize their Twitter personality. So was it Amy Therese was the person's name? That's the person, right, Marcus? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think there is, I mean, this kind of fake it till you make it concept. There's a few other, you know, like the Anna Delvey, you know.
That's recent. Yeah.
Yeah, that like that, and not even like in a sense to even too of like the Theranos Elizabeth Holmes, you know, like I feel like this, you know, this slides, you know, this you know, into just how do you do a scam.
Have you
And
followed the Rachel Dolezal?
Oh yeah.
yes, yeah,
She's not
I find her slightly more interesting than JT LeRoy, and this is interesting that you said Rachel Dolezal. That's really interesting that you say that, because there was a lot of what I think some people would call turfy conversations around why it should be okay for Rachel Dolezal to call herself transracial. And identify, and I think her biggest mistake was when she got outed. She should have just been like, yeah, I'm a white chick, and left it at that. But she kept doubling down as if almost she didn't know what to do because she was in a corner. Because her story actually is kind of weird. She does have Black adopted siblings that her parents had adopted when she was a younger teenager, but she actually got custody of her brother. So she has 3 children. Technically, she has 2 that she birthed and 1 adopted. And the state gave that boy to her because her parents were so abusive. So there is something to be said about the abuse that was suffered. And Rachel and her Black sister that was adopted say that her older brother had sexually assaulted them for some time. And he's the one that outed her. And also, once they were trying to bring charges on him, then the story of her lying came out, so no one even listens to the sister anymore. And then, I don't know if you guys ever spent time in Spokane, Washington. Unfortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, I've spent a lot of time in Spokane, Washington as a touring musician. Not a lot of Negroes there.
We coming for you, nigga!
And you know, it felt like the people that were really mad at her were mad at her because she took a position that they wanted. And it also felt like, and there's a huge white nationalist racist population in that entire region that goes all the way to western Montana. And it felt like outing her also covered up the racism that is very prevalent in that area as well. So she kind of served these interesting purposes, and she's one of the few people that you can't be infamous and famous at the same time, because what she did was, to a lot of people, extremely offensive. And if you watch the documentary about her, her son is probably the most intriguing character in it, because it's her son that says, I don't agree with everything my mom says. And he's very close with this man. And he's like, I wish she wouldn't say the things that she says because it has these negative effects on the rest of us. Her adopted son, her brother, wanted to go to Howard, where she went. But because she went there, there was so much pushback that he didn't even want to go to Howard. And I forget where he ended up going to law school. So she's an interesting character because you can't always be infamous and then famous. I don't know, Pascal, you may disagree.
No, I agree with you. I think the thing is, though, even though she is kind of born out of a traumatic kind of abuse situation as well, the thing about JT LeRoy that I find fascinating is that, like, everyone, one of the things about the documentary that I found disturbing somewhat, not in a bad way, but disturbing, is that all of the initial individuals who were talking about how they interfaced with him early on before he became famous, they were all men who struck me as having some type of predatory nature they all struck me as, I'm not saying they were sexually predatory of him, but they all struck me. There was something unseemly about the fact that this young, underaged, sexually abused, homeless child is the center of attention of all of these middle-aged men. Was disturbing to me. And if you want to address that, Marjorie, I'd really love to.
Well, it's interesting because it really just wasn't men. Like I tried to reach out to more women and they didn't come on, but I think it worked on a lot of levels in that he was, coming out as queer or like they weren't even saying trans. So I think there was sort of a sympathy or an empathy um for that. And he was, he 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 would offer, blowjobs to everyone, basically.
Well, that's what
Men,
I'm saying.
women, everyone. And Laura Albert had like an experience as being a phone sex operator. So there was a degree of trying to do entrapment when they cannot but I heard it from like women, straight men, gay men. It would be like whoever could get manipulated. And I have to say though, it was like she was like an equal opportunity abuser. She entrapped whoever she could. So the gay men might have been more prey, but it wasn't it really like, if I had to do it, it was a lot of women too who got roped
Okay.
in for hours.
Sharon Olds was part of it too, right?
Sharon Olds spent hours so many people, but she definitely manipulated, and we know that, whether it's straight men with younger women, 20 years, gay men with younger, people, and especially if you're a sex worker, this isn't someone who's innocent. And by the time he was in his 20s, there was like a sexual mystique that was being manipulated as well. Because that's what her work was. That was her trade.
Well, can we kind of like go back, I guess, because like I feel like we kind of went from like who's JT LeRoy, and then like
right into there.
Yeah, so like I don't like right into like
JT
kind of
LeRoy.
like going out.
Blowjobs.
So, yeah,
Whoa.
like can you? Because the thing is too is like when you're talking about
blowjobs.
having a psychiatrist and then started to do all these like book deals and everything like that. Can you talk about more of the process and who was Laura Albert in this process?
Well, yeah. Oh my
Good
goodness.
question, Marcus. Good question.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like that's just like we watched the documentary, so like.
Well,
there's a lot of puzzle pieces that might be
totally.
empty.
It's a really complicated story, and and I worked in mental health at the time. Just like the preface that I worked as a case manager in the Tenderloin when this story came to me. I was working with mentally ill homeless in the Tenderloin. So I was someone who was initially pretty sympathetic to someone writing these books. As a homeless person in the Tenderloin, I was like a perfect mark for Laura Albert. So she's a woman from, actually very similar background as me in a certain way. Like we're both Russian Jews from New York, which is interesting. And we're around the same age and so forth. And I don't come from, she does seem to, I think the direction does point that she comes from kind of, a divorced family with its own set of problems. Certainly not the level of, abuse or problems that JT LeRoy came from. But, I think the issue being like if she was to tell her own story about being divorced and having eating disorders, and you're like a middle class woman, like that's not that exciting for a memoir deal. Like, but if you're like bathed in lie, you're coming from a Christian fundamentalist family, you're pimped out by your mother, you're a heroin addict, and then she would mirror and mimic whatever. So as I said to Jason on the phone, she was everything but black, basically. If you were talking, she really was. Like if she was talking to someone Native American, I'm part Native American. Oh, my mother's schizophrenic too. Like you literally, if you were to trace it in her article, she would take whatever the like oppression or underclass issue, and kind of absorb it for her own or JT's own
But
issue.
Marjorie, isn't, and you're in academia, isn't that one of the big knocks, especially in the humanities, that and no one talks about this, and this is probably where I derailed your point about
No.
Rachel Dolezal. Rachel Dolezal didn't really exist in academia, even though she's just a woman with a degree, but she wasn't an academic per se. She wasn't writing books about the Black experience. But there's so many people that write about the Native experience. You have Jess Bombalera, who was an activist. She got outed. There's more people that don't get outed publicly that lie and say they're Native to give authenticity.
Well, that's the word, authenticity. But the one thing about Rachel Dolezal, and I totally agree with you, if she could have just come clean, quote unquote, and just said, this is my experience, or just not lied, I think she would have had a different course. But basically, the weird things that she did and it's like the whole thing for me, like Laura Albert, I think they start to really believe their lies. And like Rachel Dolezal, like would stop other white academics talking about race issues on the campus. So that's like nervy. You know what I mean? Like if you're another like white academic who, is an ally or sympathetic and wants to talk about something, she prevented that. And and quite honestly, I'm not really in academia. I'm really more of a hands-on production person, so I think you guys are even over my head with your discussions sometimes, to be perfectly honest.
We'll take it.
But yeah, but I'm but I think that's with Laura Albert, she did the same kind of doubling down when JT was, outed by Stephen Beachy. She just she rounded up supporters and their reputations to defend, like, I met JT has existed, she didn't let go. And I mean, and is that that's part of the pathology, or that's like sociopathy? I mean, whatever you want to label it, it didn't do her any favors, because she either believed her lies so much, which I think we do. I mean, I think it's like a defense mechanism. We believe our lies, and she doubled down, and it just made it even harder and harder. And she never really took responsibility. I mean, later on with that documentary, that director convinced her for public relations, you need to apologize. You need to say no, I can't exploit and manipulate everyone I come in contact with. That's not okay. But she really just wasn't there for the longest time. She just, and it's part of a pathology of whatever we want to call malignant narcissism, extreme sociopathy, whatever it is. It's it's about them. And that's the overlapping thing with our culture at large, right? That's the culture of the self, and everything. And when I would interview people, would be like, well, she was nice to me. And I'm like, well, what about the fact that she frauded people, exploited people, did this, that, or the next thing? And it's like, well, she was nice to me. So we really do live in this culture of just individual, an individually based culture. So, and so people were like, go girl, go Laura, and it was almost kind of repackaged as a feminist thing.
Oh yeah, and that definitely dovetail into the trans community as well. In rewatching your documentary the other night, I actually saw a friend of mine in it.
Oh,
when she was doing the photo shoot with Stephen Jenkins from Third Eye Blind. I used to live in Third Eye Blind's room, so I friends with a few of the guys, not Stephen Jenkins. So my buddy was in there, and I wanted to call him up. I was very tempted to call him up and be like, "Hey, did Stephen fuck that dude?"
Well, those bed scenes are just so.
Oh, man,
so strange. Just so weird. Oh, so he's straight. That's another person though, Pascal, that got he was a straight guy who really got. He was saying that JT was his best friend, Stephen Jenkins.
Yeah,
his best friend who doesn't exist, who is a completely different identity.
So just to recap for people that see people in the chat, I'm kind of confused. So there's a woman named Laura Albert that creates a character named JT LeRoy, and she wants to break into the writing world. She calls up a therapist and says that she's a 15-year-old prostitute that is relocated and got dropped off in San Francisco and turning tricks in San Francisco. And the doctor says you should write down your experiences. She starts writing down her experiences.
And then I'll just jump in, because we didn't even bring in the fact, and just to make it why it's not a pseudonym and where it's going a step further, she then enlists her sister-in-law, or sister in spirit, because it's not legal, to act out the character in public, and sleep over Carrie Fisher's house, to go here, do book readings, you name it. This character who like is then so it's like basically she's taking that person and that person is walking around, like so JT LeRoy, like people like why would you doubt, like how do you know I'm even Marjorie Strum? How do I know someone's Jason Miles? We just, it's a way we take for granted that people introduce themselves to you. We assume they are who they are. So when I met JT LeRoy, this person in a wig who had this horrible upbringing, you given a lot of rules to not do this, not do that, and you take for granted that this person actually is who they say they are. So that's something that just to throw out there, because that's what's confusing.
And what I find really fascinating, and we see it here in the world we live in, and we're also seeing it more, as Marcus was talking about, with people like Anna Delvey. It's the playing up of what you want to hear, right? So if you want to hear that I had a rough life because of my drug addicted mother and my inner city upbringing, I'm going to double down on my rough life and my inner city upbringing. And what she does, Laura Albert, the person that's pretending to be this JT LeRoy character, which I find fascinating, is she somehow gets a hold of the writers, which is probably a little easier to do than people think. They're writers, or not actors, people.
Well, this, I guess, dude, sorry, it was like, because like where some of the people who are getting caught up in the fraud or the fake, which, like also too is like, so like Laura Albert is is calling therapists as JT and then enlisting people to be JT physically in the real world. And then the therapist is then saying, hey, this is spicy and it should be on the page. And, like, I guess, I don't know if we want to like, kind of like what, they do like the next, I guess, stage of like, where do things start unraveling really? Because that's even when things come out that this is that Laura Albert is, or JT doesn't exist, you do have these people who are like, hell yeah, girl boss fraud is good, this is fine, but yeah, I guess where does the story go from there? And yeah, how does Laura and also too like the other people who are like literally helping be JT,
You mean how to, well, I think what's fascinating to me is that like Savannah Canute wrote her own book and has her own movie with Laura Dern in it, and Stewart, the other Kristen Stewart, right, in it.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned to Jason, like in other countries, if you were to do what they did, you could go to jail. But in our country, you get a book deal and a movie. And basically, like she writes about, and Laura writes about, that they, with the whole part with Ozzy Argento, that's rape by deception. That's against the law. You know what I mean? To pretend to be someone else. Like it started actually with sometimes the FBI infiltrating leftist groups, as police, like, as activists. And you can't just pretend to be someone and have a different identity and have sexual relations. It's called rape by deception. And it's you realize no one cares on some level because it happened to Ozzy Argento or celebrities. People aren't really sympathetic to celebrities getting abused so much because it's sort of,
and there was there was an aspect of this, and we talked about this on the phone call, which I found kind of fascinating. Again, your documentary, if you watch them in succession, if you watch Laura Albert's documentary, you're going to have questions because it's non-linear. It jumps all around to tell her story
and she's not a reliable narrator. I mean, it's like talking to Trump about what's going on. It's like she shouldn't be a source. And that's the thing I found, is that everyone after this, to answer your question, Marcus, came to her as a source on this story, and it's like ridiculous. And that's when I first realized this, like, holy cow, like everyone's looking to her to explain this, and she's just going to twist this and use the mystique as much as she could for herself, and that's what she did, as much as she possibly could,
And what I found fascinating is the fact that when you brought up the Ozzy Argento story, it's very different, because Laura Albert tells a story of Ozzy Argento kind of being just a Hollywood piece of crap that would do anything to get a movie made and rights to a deal. That may be true because I feel like a lot of characters in this were lomping onto this person, because once the JT LeRoy character was put on a certain pedestal, literary pedestal of being the next important voice, all these artists that are trying to hang on to fame, because also a lot of these guys are coming into the tail end, they're coming out with on the tail end of grunge, and grunge is supposed to be this important music, and these are supposed to be important people that have a lot to say. We're also coming off of the 92 election of Bill Clinton, where all these people were saying important things in this very apolitical era. So to be political is to write a story about a 15-year-old prostitute getting raped to smithereens in a truck stop in 1993, 94, 95. And so these guys clamoring onto this in any capacity is giving them the validity of what they've always wanted. Now I'm a character in a Warhol story. Now I'm Lou Reed. I'm this deep, brooding individual, even though I'm just, singing the same old songs and doing the same old.
I really want to play off of that, because that's something that really is important. And I'm glad that Jason touched on that, because one of the things that I found frustrating with the documentary is watching all of these notable celebrities who are so sucked into this and trying to use it to garner their own type of intellectual credibility, if you will. As I'm a literary fly on the wall. I've read JT. I was so moved. Oh my God. This the listen to this. So the word craft and the wordplay is so incredible, and it was just so fake. It was so transparently performative.
Mhm.
When you see Rosario Dawson talking about how she's so moved to read, I'm like, this is absurd, man.
And that's totally. And that's where her brilliance was.
What does it say about celebrity culture and its need? People use a term that was often used, particularly in the New York article that Jason sent, was Warholian. That this is also Warholian, because they're harking back to this whole kind of Warholian design, Andy Warhol desired to be in the clique. But what does that say about the celebrity world?
Yeah, I'm so over Warhol personally. I feel like I can't watch any more on Warhol either. But I think it does come back to this game of association. That's what I was talking about, Jay. People try to brand themselves by who they associate with, right? And so I do think on a certain level, I mean, most of these celebrities like Sandra Bernhard or people, they never met JT another time practically. Laura Albert would reach out to their publishers, get a book to them, and then say, we're having this big event. Would they read for this cause celeb? So, I mean, this is what, and so what Ponio Giannopoulos, the editor, said, I do think for them it was functioning as a form of just pleasurable altruism. I don't think it was something they thought about that much. It was I'm going to go to this party and Courtney Love's going to be there and this one. And that's really how celebrity culture works, right? It's all about this, who's hot, this association. And Laura really was able to have her manipulate that pulse of American culture to her own end. I mean, that's where I think when when I was making the film, people were just kind of scared of her almost, they were spooked, because she really did have a bizarre, wicked kind of insight into the machinations and the psychology. And the truth of the matter is, none of us are pure, and we do have multiple motivations, and artists are always hustling. And this is the imprints kind of our culture. So, I mean, she just took it and ran. It's incredible, really, when you think about it.
To me, it's just an interesting, it's an incredible statement of the way in which capitalism,
absolutely,
art, and creativity merge to create this kind of shallow parasitic symbiosis where everything is living off of each other just to try and the hustle. And you say it all the time. We talk about here the hustle culture, the hustle element of the whole art form that people are reduced to. It's sad.
And imagine trying to make a documentary and produce it on this topic and not do it like the way Hollywood wants you to. It was, what to quote a friend of mine, just an exhausting amount of quote unquote mindfulness. I mean, like it was just like insane making the film. And that's a whole, I won't derail it there, but it was incredible. Like the amount of bullshit that I experienced to just not like basically like to be able to have just a real honest conversation about the topic and not be like go girl or like this is
Wow.
like people wanted to think it was just purely funny, and there is a funny dark humor to it, I think, and I'm not like, I think that exists, but it's also just kind of creepy, and particularly for the people that the young you know, street trans population that read the statement. I mean, that's back to co-optation or appropriation and all that, and that's just inexcusable, and reprehensible, right? Like straight up. So I couldn't make a documentary that was going to just be like funny or something about this topic, because I didn't think it was. I mean, if you just keep it on a celebrity level, it could be funny maybe, but if you scratch the surface, it's just
fascinating.
pathological. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because again, I think we live in a world right now where there's a very thin line between hoax and market share.
Exactly.
And I don't think people really understand that. And so the conflation is very easy. Oh, this person's a con artist. And it's like, are they a con artist, or are they trying to grasp a share of a market that's created, in the world that we exist in right now in this podcast sphere?
You said something that's so important there, Jason, because the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was cryptocurrency and NFTs.
Yes.
Hoax and market share.
Exactly. That was crazy, right?
It's still going. That's the thing too. It's like that. It's still going. It's still going on.
Exactly.
That's like it won't stop.
And what you say about this passive altruism that people can have through JT LeRoy, and it definitely
or even
is
pleasurable.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that is part of a bourgeois liberal sensibility that I think this really plays on. And I think one of the things that we talk about here is the idea of liberal democracy. And constantly you see people trying to reform liberal democracy, but not really want to tear it down or see any other way. They just want a nicer way to do things. You work with the unhoused in San Francisco. I worked with the unhoused as being one as well in Oakland, and there's always someone that wants a more humane way to get it out of my face. Can you just get it out of my face nicer? You don't have to be so rough with arresting them, but please arrest them and get it out of my face in a nicer way. So this kind of being able to read these books that just play into the stereotype of what you think this world consists of.
That's, you put your finger on it, and this isn't an original idea of mine, but this is when I really also just realized, oh my gosh, how horrible is this really, is basically when you realize that the trans community, and you can see this in Texas now, has been fighting the idea that you become trans because of child abuse. Do you know what I mean? So that is why, Child Protective Services have been taking children from their homes, because this idea that that's how you end up trans. And then, if Laura Albert actually was, if that was your true story and your parents did abuse you and you ended up trans, that's your story to tell. And we couldn't that would be what it was. But if that is not your story to tell, and you are just perpetuating one of the worst stereotypes that the trans community is pushing back on, that's really, again, reprehensible. It's not okay to say that like JT became trans because the mother dressed him up at 7 and the boyfriend raped him repeatedly. And that's, and we didn't really have as much analysis about that whole community. That community was much more closeted at the time. So that didn't, that wasn't really, there wasn't much awareness on it,
Marcus,
so anyway.
Well, and I kind of just had something that's like thinking about what we were talking about beforehand. Kind of overall on the celebrity and stuff like that, and it kind of just reminded me a little bit uh art, or like the high end art and stuff like that. Um, where you get like a banana duct taped to the
Right.
wall sells for however $1 million.
Abstract art, high end abstract art.
Yeah, and even too, I'm like in where of and like Jason might even go like maybe able to go a lot deeper in this with music, with indie music.
Mhm.
And what does indie mean? And it's like, oh, like like all the indie artists like have parents who are producers or major record label like execs and stuff like that. It's so it's like this whole like facade, like kayfabe and like where like all of these other things that kind of like play into this whole, I guess, this specific story just working. And I think like that's what you had said before we'd started, is like there are so many levels to kind of just dissect this thing that was the story of JT and what Laura did. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah,
No, I
I
mean,
was
look,
just like thinking
Marcus,
about like the
I've
high art and stuff like that of like, hey, yeah, this is all just like, it's all just BS, and there's no real analysis of and especially too in JT's case of like the writing itself, and that's where you get to of like, where's the analysis on how this is art, like why is this beautiful, what like why and like
Well,
what does it mean when other people can do the same thing easily? I've got duct tape, I've got bananas, I'm not rich.
Jesus.
well, Marcus, I told you I've played numerous noise shows where there's some things I've seen in that world that were kind of interesting, but a lot of it was just people dicking around on a modular synth, which means you're just taking patch cables and putting them in holes, and you're getting a sound out of it. And I'm watching people sit down Indian style in a room going, oh, this is so cool. And I'm like, well, you can do it too. There's no method to it. It's not, he doesn't know or she doesn't know what they're doing. They're just literally plugging these things into holes, and someone told you it was important. Ergo, you think it's important. And I think that's kind of the real through line of JT and all these other hoaxes.
Well, I was going to say, Marcus, on that note, too, what you said, like when her film came out, it premiered at Sundance, that markets itself as an independent, film, it's where you can premiere a film for independent films. And this is produced by A&E and Vice. And like, what does independent film mean when Sundance is promoting independent films that are, produced by large corporations? Like, and it was also put in a selection of women, like notable women's films. And I forget, it was like these documentaries on these like amazing women, and then this was in that same category. And I just had my stomach just completely was like, this is crazy, like this is nuts. But
Yeah. Well, and that's just like in someone I was asked, like, so no one checked, and which is like a fantastic question.
right,
Which
there was
I'm
no
going
fact
to,
checking, no fact
yeah,
checking.
well, and I want to kind of respond to with another question of like, what does checking mean when they've got yellow cake, they've got WMDs, and no one checked,
Well,
or no one
that's
bothers to
well,
speak,
that's
actually,
well, that's the thing. Well, basically, like that works on a. Well, I mean, the books, whether they're good or not. I mean, that's why I left it open handed. Like, if people want to read a book and they enjoy the books, like I could care less. Like, read a book. Like, read everything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all for reading, but like the reality is the whole memoir industry doesn't have fact checkers. You know what I mean? Like, and now they do a little bit, because now that I forget all the names, I could rattle them at one point, but we had the person in gangs in LA who actually, their family outed her in one day. You know what I mean? Like, they saw her in the New York Times, and in one day they were like, she didn't grow up in gangs in LA. I forget the names of these characters, but like the interesting thing about Laura Albert's family is that like the whole family, everyone kept it. Like, they went along with it for so many years. Like, they didn't out her. too. Like people who could have outed her didn't. But the books, so if the books are good or whatever, there is, but then the journalists, it wasn't until Stephen Beachy really did the hard work. And when Stephen Beachy from the New York Magazine, I spoke with him, I felt like, okay, Laura Albert wrote the books, but JT LeRoy has to exist. I mean, I met him in person. I spoke to the doctors where he went through the clinic. Like,
Wow.
how could this not add up? And he had to he asked me so many questions. I was like, you're right, you're right, you're right. Like it was just an overview. There is like she used patient confidentiality, to her advantage. I mean, she really, she's an intelligent woman who figured out this. It's almost like the Bernie Madoff of like the literary hoaxes. I mean, it's really went on and on.
But when we think about like authenticity, because I think again that's another through line, a theme of this whole thing we're talking about here is authenticity. Pascal, let's think about hip hop. 50 Cent. 50 Cent, all his marketing isn't the greatest producers in hip hop have made maybe the greatest record ever that has destroyed hip hop by having the gunshot be the snare. Like, how black can it get? But what is 50 Cent's story for that second album that is so big? It's not the 8 singles that come from it. It's he got shot 9 times. Following the 50 Cent model, you then get an era of backstory rappers. Everybody has to have a backstory. What was Run DMC's backstory? These guys were rapping about going to college. They were literally rapping about going to university. So all of a sudden, not to say that one is better than the other, but it's just this change of I need authenticity. Ice Cube was bused to schools in the Valley. He doesn't talk about going to school with all these white kids, didn't know about all the drugs they did. Like that's not the lyrics that he talks about, right?
Well, that's
This authenticity is needed in hip hop to the point where when we talk about kayfabe playing out, what I want people to understand when I talk about kayfabe playing out is the fact that you start to be a true believer in it and live it. Now you have these young men. Sadly, I get too many DJ Vlad emails, and I won't tell you why I get DJ Vlad emails. It's a whole other show. But rappers dying. They're not famous. This isn't Pac and Biggie because, again, terrestrial radio, MTV, all that's gone. But still, these young men are dying over authenticity. They're going to prison now over authenticity. The district attorney in Atlanta said, I am looking at RICO charges for rappers because of authenticity. And that's what this woman sold.
Totally. Like you have to be a heroin addict to be an independent, like an indie grunge musician, right? Like you have to have your like drug addiction and get over it, right? So I mean, for people who maybe, didn't have anything, like you always can use heroin, right? Like that's really, I mean, that's real, isn't it? It's like, and then people perform it. It's like everyone sort of knows like, oh, this is my angle. This is like, and we all have to kind of, I mean, that's the era, unfortunately, too, right? Of like promoting and branding and the number, right? And yeah, I mean, I haven't read him in a while, but I didn't like Theodore Adorno, back to the academic stuff. I think he kind of discusses.
This is a
Frankfurt School
show here, Marjorie.
We don't have to go there because I can't really speak with any. I read the book a while ago when I was working on this, and I was like, oh wow, But there's also like the situationists, where people. That's what I thought also overlapped on a theoretical level with the situations with people. Like, what is reality, right? Like, just being photographed becomes reality now, and like and that's what. Again, Laura Albert was really, it's hard to give her a compliment and say it was brilliant because like I don't think manipulation is brilliant. Like I'm not a big fan of manipulation as a tactic, but like everything was documented, everything was photographed, so there it is. Like, if everything that's how it goes, that's what the proof is, then it exists.
One of the things, oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
One of the things that I found so weird about this documentary and the story really is that it wasn't until, well, I don't know if I'm giving up anything, but towards the end, you do have people who say the writing was trash. The writing was not even good. So I wonder if this has something to do with how people are taking in modern art. Oh, my 7 year old kid can draw that. My
Oh
7 year
yeah,
old kid can paint that kind of thing. And maybe looking for authenticity and truth as a kind of anchor in the middle of all of that. Because they don't seem to have criteria for art. It's just like someone told me this was art. And so it is. And I can either say I hate it or I love it.
right. And then and that well, I'll just say that those are the blurbs, right? Like every book we get like what 20 blurbs now of
Mhm.
people, and that's it's like the blurb game. And there actually is a good documentary called My Kid Could Paint That, and it's about
Yes.
a hoax. Did you? I don't. I'll just
Yes.
throw
The
that out there.
Jackson Pollock kid. Yeah.
Yeah, that was also pretty good. I mean, I like that one because it hits on the same like thing. No, I don't think people well, we don't learn it, you know, too, in schools. We don't really learn to be critical thinkers or I mean, you know, the bottom line is art is subjective. I mean, it's truly, truly subjective, and we act as if it's not. I mean, there is, you know, some things that are quality that maybe appeal to more people, and that's where it's good or it communicates the way it's supposed to, and that's what makes it good. But generally speaking, I mean, I had to sit through, you know, I have a graduate degree in film, and I had to sit through so many horrible films by white men. I mean, I just sat through like, and I feel like it damaged me. I literally think it psychologically fucking damaged me and my psyche. And the only time you saw a woman was if she was in the kitchen with like a mother, as a mother with her kids, or as a beauty interest. And like I sat through film history, and we didn't see one film by a woman in San Francisco. This is my education, film history, and then I think we had like maybe one year, and I still I have to stop when we show Birth of the Nation with Griffith, like, and just explain this is a racist film. I mean, like, this is not like I'm not even talking. It's like long time ago. This is my education, so that's where it's creepy,
It's yeah. The whole.
right? I mean, it's damaging. Like I sat
Well,
through so much, and it
to
was
let you
great
know,
art. It's master art.
you mentioned Theodore Adorno, and you know the culture industry is something that we talk about on this show a lot. And we talk about Adorno, the Frankfurt School, and the role in which pop culture plays, particularly film, television, even music, in reifying the hierarchies that are normative in American capitalism.
exactly.
And you know, One Dimensional Man and all of those works that come out of that school of art that talk about how the ideological superstructure of American capitalism is actually also permeated through popular culture to maintain the normalcy of the system. And I think it's a very important analysis. And you see that in this stale, kind of monochromatic notion of what is film and what is art that you were talking about, you studied in film school, where everyone, you know, this whole kind of like dramatic renderings of like American normative masculinity and patriarchy, which are only created after World War II and the New Deal anyway, by the way, because it's not like the American family structure was this static thing that existed throughout time. It was changing with the political economy of the society as well. But because in the 50s everyone's buying this Ozzie and Harriet narrative of what family is, we buy into this kind of very stale kind of
Because it's very anti-communist, right? It's
right.
it's a
That's
very
what I love to
anti-communist notion, and the suburbs have to be created. You know, the idea of also like being anti-art sadly comes up in this, especially like we're talking high art. And there's a pretty big right-wing YouTuber, Marcus, you know who this guy is, Paul something. Is it Paul Watson or something like that? Is that his name?
Not Paul Watson.
Oh,
What's
there's
his
a
name?
Paul
MT?
Molyneux,
No,
or
it's not
no,
Stefan
not
Molyneux. He's
that
British. Who is it, MT?
Paul
Let me think.
Stefan.
Anyway, he has a very, very famous video where he's shitting on modern art. And one of the things he talks about is one of the Paul Joseph Watson. Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
there literally was a modern art piece where someone put feces in cans. There was
Right.
literally a modern art piece where someone had kind of what looked like a messy bed. But to just show the messy bed and go, this MFer said this is art, this is the world we live in, you know, you're kind of discounting what art looked like even during Basquiat's era of minimalism. You know, the reason why he was so popular and kind of his crew was because this is an era of like black canvases with one white dot. You know, it's a very minimalist era, and that's what high art looked like. So when these very colorful canvases were coming out that he was doing, it was eye-catching for the Warhols of the world to see. Whether or not you think Basquiat is a great figure, you know, we're not going to get into that conversation because that would take us into another hour, and I have good friends that would yell at me if I discounted his greatness. But,
I like him. I've seen a bunch of documentaries. I actually just really like his art. You know, I mean, I genuinely, back to the subjectivity of it, like his art, I respond to. So, I mean, maybe I'm supposed to. You guys probably know a lot more about it.
Well, no, and this, I guess, though, like where it gets is like the simple thing of like in being subjective is what is the value of the original? What's the value of someone painting a copy of it, right? Every stroke for stroke, or what's, you know, versus you know, getting a detailed HD of it printed, or you just, you know, print a JPEG off of the inkjet. And that's where it's
the hoax.
It's on
we're
you.
disconnected. We're disconnected from this deep thought to the point where the art galleries, I take my little kid, I'm sorry, Pascal, I take my little kid who's 3, and we walk into the art galleries in the city, and not far from where you've been for years in the Tenderloin, right? We walk around, and sometimes they're nice to us because they see the little kid, and they'll take us into the rooms with the Picassos that they have hidden away. This is even in Martin Lawrence galleries and stuff like that. They know I don't have any fucking money, but they just, I think they're bored or whatever. And I let my kid take in art for whatever it is for him at 3-4 years old, right? Let's just look at some stuff and hang out. And it's interesting that they take us on and they explain the pieces to us and everything. So he's getting this free art education from the art galleries, and we're so disconnected from this because they're telling me constantly that people come in and they have to remind them, please don't take pictures of that, because people want to take a picture of it, to prove they were there. That's another problem we talked about, Marcus, on our Woodstock show. And then there are people in this world that take pictures of that shit and then get it printed and put it up in their house. Like, this it's so disposable.
But why should that's the thing, like, why not? Why not? You know, like, and that's,
you want art to be disposable?
No, but that's the thing is someone taking a picture of it and then putting it up on their wall, is that disposing of it?
Yes.
How?
You don't care.
You're diminishing the rarity of the work products.
Yeah.
You're diminishing the rarity of the work product.
Yes, but that's the thing is that the rarity has really nothing to do with the actual, I guess, like the value of the art, which is like the actual shareability. You know, how is this spread? How many people actually enjoy this? How many people actually want to take this and put it on their wall? Because that's the thing too, is like that person probably would like an original or, you know, a very detailed copy, but all they can get is seeing it one time and hopefully snapping a picture of it, or maybe just downloading it.
No. Look at it like music.
It's like, are they doing a selfie of it, or are they just taking a picture of the picture?
Both,
or the painting?
But still, look at it like music. As music is becoming more ubiquitous, it has lost its value. No one cares. It's free. I don't care what you say. I don't even want to hear what you say. Why do you think the TikTokification of music is where people make money? Why do you think sound, if you want to make money in music, it's not about being an artist, it's about creating sound libraries and selling 5 hours of music to a motion picture company. That's where the money is made. I still get emails daily about, hey, we're looking for a song that sounds like a 50s version of this. We only need 30 seconds. That is really where the money is made.
Well, yes,
so there is no value in it.
But that's
I've devalued it by giving it out for free to everyone.
Musicians are still making songs. Artists are still making songs. And I do have a question, Dr. Sturm. Then
people are still painting pictures.
Exactly, right? So how much is it devalued? If you're making a documentary, right?
You really want to wait? Time out. Do you really want to say just because someone does it, it's devalued? Is that really what you want? It's not devalued because people do it. That's what you're saying. It exists, therefore it's not devalued. Do you really want to get into how revenues are different over the devaluation of music?
We could
But I
Do
argue.
you really want to have that discussion right now?
Art,
No, when
Yeah, I sound like a cranky old man. Your mom's a
can
cranky
argue
old man.
you
some
sound like
businesses
you,
not art.
you sound like a cranky old businessman. Because when you talk about revenues, you're not really talking about, at least, I don't think you're really talking about why would an artist create art versus maybe why would someone scam art? Why would someone do a fraud and fake art? And so I guess the question too of like devaluing.
Well, Marcus, now you're
It's-
coming into a kind of existential question about concepts like copyright and trademark. Is there any value in having things like that? I mean, if you want to talk about from an anti-capitalist, Marxist kind of communist socialist point of view, is like, why are we copywriting or trademarking things that may be replicated and have value to other people? If we paid for it at one time, why do we have to trademark it and copyright it? That's a philosophical question that you can have if you want to have that question. But all I'm saying is that within the paradigms, there is an argument to be had that if we want to envision a new society in which we change these hierarchical value systems that we find to be damaging, that we maybe have to interrogate whether or not we believe in having a kind of trademark or copyright worldview on our productive capacity. That's an argument that's willing to be had.
I mean, that was the
But
whole
at the-
fan fiction discussion that Stefan we were having the other day.
But at the same time, you don't change that gear when you're already in a paradigm where people are create artistic work products, trying to live their lives, subsidizing their lives doing so, and people are not respecting their
Because what
capacity.
Marcus doesn't
100%.
understand, Pascal,
No,
is
easy,
that
easy.
let me
easy,
hold
Jason.
on.
No,
hold
no,
on,
no.
hold
Because
on.
I just don't.
What
I don't
Marcus doesn't-
appreciate
hold
the
on, let
what
me say
Marcus
this.
does.
Let me say this. What you don't understand is that first and foremost, the people that control how music comes out then controls how music ends up sounding. And there's a reason why we live in the jinglification, TikTok dance step era of music right now. Because that's where the money is. And if you don't understand that, then what are you really saying? That's extremely important, especially also when we talk about art.
But taking a photo of a Picasso in an art gallery, I mean, those people, like, there's not, I mean, in that way, it's the kind of the inverse there, because it's like they're going to be making millions eventually from somebody on that painting, you know what I mean? And they're already part of the hype. So if someone wants to take a photo and put it up, I mean, that seems to me a little kind of, I think Marcus's point, I can see with that point, you know, in that context, like if someone takes a photo of the Picasso that's already selling for millions or something, it's different than the music in a sense. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I mean, I have friends that are Jackson Street artists in New Orleans, and that's literally how they pay their rent. And when people go by and take a picture of their art and then they blow it up on their wall and don't pay them, that definitely affects their bottom line. So I always see it from the standpoint of it's hard for artists in a world where art is disposable, where there is no value you've put on it to make money. So there's always this talk about artists need to make money and blah, 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 blah. But then when you have this conversation about disposable art, then all of a sudden it's okay for art to be disposable.
And the whole conversation would change, I mean, if the United States was actually to fund artists, you know, the way we do in Europe or Mexico.
Canada.
I mean, I think the country of Mexico funds more artists. Like my partner is a sound artist, and the people he plays with in Europe, you know, they go there, they're paid a monthly salary by the government. And in here, he has to work, you know, at the public library 20 hours a week in order for us to survive, you know what I mean? And it's just a shame that we, like, all of our art has to be forced into this capitalist model.
Yeah, that's an alternative that I would like to have a conversation about, than having to render a situation where the artist is dependent on the market to subsidize his lifestyle.
It's
I mean, we
ridiculous.
did that at one point in this country, right? We funded
Yeah.
art. We funded high art in this country, and we tried to put high art into the hinterlands of this country during the New Deal. That's why you have the architecture you have, and some of the sculpture that you have in places like North Dakota.
Did Marcus take off?
Yeah, he's mad at me.
Is he?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's fine. It's fine.
okay.
In Canada, you can have your rap video partially paid for by the Canadian government.
They'll
Yeah.
pay for your music tour. We hosted a friend of ours that actually has a venue in Canada that's a community venue in Toronto. And when her and her partner came out and needed a show in Oakland, we hosted it at the studio. And I went to give her money because we pooled money at the end of the night. And I was like, well, here's money, you know, because they did the same thing for us when we were on tour out there. And she was like, oh, no, don't worry about it. They gave us a grip to do this tour. Like they funded it. And I was like, that's a whole different level of being able to do what you want to do, how you want to do it without the confines of the market dictating how you do it. And I think that's where I was getting frustrated with the conversation, because when you don't understand how the dictates of the market dictate what you hear, to just flippantly say, well, music still gets made, ergo there's no problem. It's like, well, what music gets made? Why are all the top 10 songs in this country less than 3 minutes long?
Right. Oh no, totally. And then that's basically the same with the documentary, like the dominant production values. Like everyone, I mean, on one level, it is exciting that, you know, it's been democratized making films in the last, you know, let's say 10, 15 years in a way that people can with Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro, and even like an iPhone and, you know, and the audio equipment. It doesn't take that much money actually to make them the way it did. And that's good, but it still takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to do it. And then, so like for me with making this film, it's like I had the skills to make the film, but like you still need to live and exist. And you can just feel that there's just this like wicked like paranoia. Like I felt like I was just obviously this wild card coming out of San Francisco because no one really cared about me. I happened to have started the film and got hoaxed. So I had this like treasure chest of footage that people wanted, but they weren't really particularly interested necessarily in my point of view or vision. But there was just so much paranoia about like what the production values would be, what it would look like, and so forth. And so I was actually working with A&E at one point. My film was greenlighted for whatever budget it took. And then it crashed, the economy crashed, and they put my film on hold. And so I was like literally in shock when I got like an email from Vice that A&E was now making a film with this other male director from LA who like they obviously didn't care at all about, you know, the point of view or what was the expression behind it. It was just like, oh, we're going to just go and put our money in this film now because, you know, it's going to have the bells and whistles and all the machination around it, you know, all of this. And so I wrote like the woman who I'd been interacting with at A&E, I go, is this for real? Are you now like sponsoring this opposite, like literally the inverse of what I was doing? You're about to, and she's like, oh yes, we hope that we can option your footage, your wonderful footage.
Whoa.
Like this kind of like, and I just said, yeah, well, I'll keep you in mind on my talk. I kind of just repeated back to what her original email when like I'll put it on hold. I'm on my own timeline.
Perfect
And
example.
again, I don't, because we have these talks with different artists and filmmakers. You know, we had another documentary filmmaker on who made a fascinating documentary about the future of our boomer population as they're getting manipulated into the caregiver. What's it called? Britney Spears just had it. What is it called, MT?
Oh, conservatorship. Yeah.
And he made a great documentary called The Guardians, and he was trying to also make a feature film. And those notes got optioned into a different film that wasn't necessarily his story, that ends up being a very pro-capitalist film, which wasn't necessarily his goal when he was telling his original story and the idea that he had for his film. And there's a lot of stories in Hollywood where these types of things happen, and I don't think the average person knows the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made when it comes to stuff like this.
It was incredible. It was literally. Yeah, were you going to say something, Pascal?
What I was going to say is that what you're explaining is a very perfect example of how the interface of the market with the creative process limits the options that the creator or the artist has in terms of even displaying or how their work is segmented, how their work is taken apart. And these are considerations that, again, for those of us who are trying to envision a new society, I think that we really have to broaden our horizons in terms of trying to discuss what does it look like to live in a world where capitalism is not the defining edict upon which creativity is actually directed, but we can have ways of alternatively subsidizing the creative process, where not only maybe not just government, but cooperative economic models or some type of paradigm where we don't have to depend on pure for-profit paradigms to subsidize creation. And I think it's something that's worth investigating because so much of what we do when we challenge capitalism is based on reacting to the system or reacting to the harms of capitalism, the problems of capitalism. But so little of it is proactively about creating a model that is something that actually is workable, that we can find a way to actually change the existing paradigm, something feasible for people to actually live with and work with. And I think that it's something that we need to spend more time doing.
Well, like the Patreon model actually is pretty good on that level, right? Like, yeah, but I agree. Like, but it's a lot of, yeah, it's a lot of work. You know what I mean? And that's where like, um, just a lot of discussions around healing and all this stuff that's very individualistic. It doesn't always take in mind like the sociopaths, the people who are willing to exploit or go over the edge for their own needs. I mean, that's what I feel like was my big, um, one of my big, I mean, I worked again with mental illness and the unhoused and so forth. And it was a really benign, nice group of people that I worked with. So when I went into trying to produce this film, I really wasn't prepared for the amount of just blatant self-servingness. Like people are so willing to just be what's best for me, like, and not thinking about, mutuality or what you're talking about. It's definitely not. And I mean, that was my, and that's why the film took me so long to make, basically, because one thing after another, like that example was occurring. And it was really, I mean, and I needed to live too. And I had young kids and it was the economy. So it's a hard one when, you're offered a lot of money to be like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to turn this down. And actually, but what's the point after a while? What's the point of working so hard to make something that doesn't communicate what you're trying to say just for your name or your career? And that's what they're banking on. Like I'll give you another example. I shot the whole film. I hired an editor.
Mhm.
And then this editor, I won't name him, but he's a big editor. He's worked with a major director, edited a lot of films, a lot more experience than me. He decides he wants to co-direct my film. This is after it's been greenlighted, and I hired him. He wants to co-direct it. And that's when I was like, no, you're not co-directing the film. I hired you as the editor. And he was like, well, I want to get into directing. And it's like, well, pick a topic, raise the money, shoot it, and, direct your film. But it was just so much. But that's when A&E dropped me first, because he was part of the package and he wanted to co-direct it, So that's
Right.
when they first dropped it, because, and I asked them straight, I go, has this happened to your male directors? Do you drop your male directors when their editors want to suddenly co-direct? And then they came back. That's what I'm saying. Then they came back to me, gave me 2 producers in LA. I met with them, flew there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is just like, it was just incredible. And then that's when the economy, and they put it on hold. But I had many conversations. I mean, we had been working on contracts, the whole thing, and then they went and funded the opposite thing.
But doesn't that kind of play into also what we're talking about with the whole JT thing, which is
right.
like when you have a certain access, like I had a very prominent artist do a remix for us, and because of that, deals were worked out with PR companies that had to review my album now because it featured this artist on there that they wouldn't have had before. That I wouldn't have had access to these large publications before had this person not been a part of it. Like that's part of the game that it seems
Totally.
like Laura Albert kind of mastered, bringing it back to the JT LeRoy thing.
Executive produced. Like every time you see executive produced on a documentary, that person might be doing nothing other than putting their name, like the blurb, executive produced. So it's a whole game of branding and association. And that's where like you can make your whole film, bring in a producer, and that's how you get into Sundance. Sundance, like the number that's a fraud. I mean, that Sundance is a fraud where the number of $25 or more fees they're taking and how many of the films are getting in because of the sales agent and the producer. I mean, that's the statistics we need. And I would bet it's 95. I mean, the number of films that are being picked because they're just, such great, films that rose to the top. And they do this year after year after year after year. And it's because they're, hosting parties and, that's the same thing. And then, even the documentary, which whole documentary industry, which has got to be one of the most righteous and pure industries within capitalism, I would say. I mean, it's like, a lot of, geeky people. Their parties at all of the things are still being funded by, HBO and A&E, and it's all the same thing. It's even
Foundation,
in this,
Foundation World.
It's the same thing like going on, and that's all going back to we don't have funding from our government. You know what I mean? This is where we're at. So you can't, like, these little nonprofits that are doing their festivals, they need to pay their salaries. I mean, so it just, you can't really hate on everyone, but it doesn't make for a good art world. It doesn't make for an authentic art world.
And it goes back to my initial point, which is just because stuff is created, you can't belittle what's influencing the creation. And if I understand that I want to make money doing music, that's why I'm putting it out, because I wouldn't put it out if I didn't want to make money on it, right? It has to sound a certain way. It has to fit in a certain box. And these things influence your creations, if it will. Even movies. The gentleman that was it Todd Phillips that made the Joker? He's not a fan of superhero movies, but he wanted to do a movie on neoliberalism, and he felt the only way he could get one bought is if he put it in a superhero context. So you get the Joker. That's out of his mouth. That's what he says. So again, the market dictates more than you would like the art that's created.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, I just think that, and then that in turn, like, obviously just, allows everyone to think what is, those dominant, artistic values, that becomes the setup for what people value as good or bad and how they judge it. They're just not even used to being exposed to something different, as well. So that then their reaction, is, has its own biases from the beginning because they're just not used to it.
Yeah. MT, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I kind of just want to say, I think that picking up on Pascal's point about what is art going to look like outside of capitalism, I just want to remind us all that we can look at what art was like before capitalism. There is a before capitalism. It is not, every time, every era, all the time. And I think that the art will change if we can move from consumers to citizens. And if that process is socialism, then so be it. We need to just make sure to have that as an aim and as a goal. People need to know what art is for. They need to know what art is and what it's for. It is to illuminate the human experience. And I think people lose track of that. They make things that are just stuff. And stuff is stuff, and art is art. They're not the same.
You know what's
Just
really
because.
Amen.
well, what's important about you saying this, MT, and I say this seriously, is that you are someone who invested at least 8 years of your life in high quality artistic education.
Mhm.
You know, she
Mhm.
MT went to fashion
Yeah.
school of performing arts in New York, and also went to I think like a fashion technological school for undergraduates. So it's really I think that your words here have significant import.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I will say that in watching this documentary, it did take me back to high school. Um, that's kind of the era, but also I went to the Fame School, the school that Fame was written about. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, I recognize the characters. I recognize some of these people. I look at some of these actors that we were looking to have better standards for art, and I can see some of the people that I went to school with. Their boundaries for certain things are porous, and they're not always entirely in control of what they're taking in and what they're giving out. They're also looking to make more art, and sometimes they just don't have enough inside, and they will steal feelings.
Right. Right.
Mm.
So
Well,
there's an
yeah.
idea of stealing something from JT as well.
Well, and also, like, I mean, a lot of them did come from, like, even like Lou Reed or whoever, like, they were addicts. They had, and I think they wanted to get close to JT almost to kind of, restart their pain or just like remind themselves of that era to kind of juice off it. But you're right, they can steal feelings or just, try to get back at that original, like, thing that inspired them or so forth. I mean, it really was for me, like, I remember thinking, like, it just seemed like this little Rimbaud character. Like, people were like, "Oh, it was almost did have, like, almost it was too good to be true energy." And everyone, I mean, but it was like Gus John Waters, it was Tom Waits. It was people who had a jaded reputation. That's what was really interesting too. It wasn't even just, um, you know, normal when we think of celebrities, when we think of people who are just not, the deepest and darkest. This was like a deep, then that's what's kind of fascinating is that so many intelligent people got hoaxed.
That is a real sticking point for me. I am still trying to figure out exactly what made it so palpable to people that they wanted to participate in this lie. Another thing that reminded me of high school in the documentary was um, when I was in high school, I wanted to write a novel, some great novels, some great American novel, having not even read a lot of great American novels at the time. But I know that there was this writer, a young adult writer. Her name was S.E. Hinton. And at 16, she wrote The Outsiders, an incredible book. She wrote that in 1910. And I wanted to be so much like her. And I wanted to write some amazing book as a teenager. For me to have idolized her and even tried to write, and then to find out towards the end of the documentary that JT wasn't even a good writer, just really, I think it's the kind of anger you get when you're an artist and you try to make something. And then you see somebody who did not try to make something, and they are getting. It's not that I wanted fame and all of this other stuff, but maybe there are people who do. They feel that that's what comes with making good art, and they should have it too. So yeah, kind of infuriating. Not just fascinating, but infuriating also.
No, no, it's definitely, like, angering too. I mean, like, I felt that way, and I mean, I've gotten over it now, but, like, when this other documentary was being produced with, like, millions of dollars just being, like, handed over to them, probably, like, editors and assistant editors and people, archivists and I had to do, like, everything pretty much by myself. You can't help but just be like, "Wow," like, this is, like, incredible, and that they don't even care, again, it's back to the fact checking. You know what I mean? Like, is that if someone who is a pathological liar is speaking for 2 hours, is that being fact checked? No. You know what I mean? It's not really a documentary. It's more like a memoir piece of her story. But so it was definitely just, you know, quite the quote unquote learning experience. Angering is right. You're just like, yeah. I mean, and that's, I think a lot of writers, that's where Laura Albert would just turn it around and say, Stephen Beachy and all these people were jealous. They were jealous of JT LeRoy's success and fame. And so that's how, like, it was always diffused. And it wasn't like, so any legit criticism or back to the fact checking, it was jealousy. Like, Stephen Beachy was just like a jealous writer.
Wow.
Incredible.
I know.
That's interesting. That takes me back to Pascal's earlier point about how some of the older men in the documentary that became friends with JT seemed to want to have sex with him. And so it seems like there's just a space that opened up that was incredibly complex, and a lot of feelings were involved in there.
Well, that's basically what it boils down to. You nailed it. She was, by and large, someone who manipulated on a very intense emotional level. She, like, my partner once said, like, if you walked up to someone and, took out a gun and said, like, give me all your money, that's one kind of thing. And in this case, it was like, oh, I'm XYZ. I'm like a homeless, I'm suicidal, I'm this, that, and next. So give me your time, your energy, your resources. And that's how the con worked. Like someone in the documentary said, she never said, give me this always directly, but she embroiled you so much. And she made everyone feel like they were special. And I think, and I think this goes for a lot of places in my life, because I was making the documentary, I was sort of protected because, I mean, coming from sort of a case manager, social work background, I think I could have been manipulated a lot more than I was. But in this case, she treated me like I was the media and I was a journalist, and it created a great divide, which was and it ended up being in my favor. And I ended up like taking something from these takers. Like, I had this footage, like, that was, and it was a big mistake of hers. Like, she shouldn't have had me documenting. Like, she just kind of, she just was sort of letting me document. And that was a mistake of hers that ended
Sometimes
up.
that's the ego. Yeah, they do make mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
They get away with so much. But
She tried to stop the documentary. I got like I lost count of the number of letters from different lawyers. And then when it premiered, premiered at Doc New York City, she sent, her lawyer sent a letter to everyone on the documentary, Doc New York City's like panel, like the people who run it were all threatened if they screened it. And she did this, she followed me around different festivals, just trying to harass different festivals. But, I was telling Jason, back to what we were talking about, the only reason my film could screen is if I got E&O insurance. So basically every documentary that you watch has to pay. And depending if there's lawsuits involved, it's more or less expensive. So we say we have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech, but no one could screen my film unless I pay $10,000 or $12,000 for E&O insurance.
Errors and omissions
Yes.
insurance.
So that is like really crazy because, I mean, I happened to have people who were backing me who paid it at the last minute, right before the festival premiered. And that's why the whole film got out to the public. But if I couldn't have rounded up that, she might have felt like emboldened and successful, and I might even more not gotten a chance to have my errors and omissions insurance. And the film, after years of work, just never would have been seen.
She is,
I know.
Yeah. Technical term.
And it's like, and it's basically, and I said to her, you make your film, I'll make my film.
Yeah.
And, we have a right to freedom of speech. I mean, she's someone who had a right to 3-4 different personas, and I don't have a right to express myself. She's that. It was just incredible. So yeah, it was a really crazy experience.
You was interfering with the money. You was interfering with the money stream. You can't do that.
Right.
So
Yeah, exactly.
that
I
also
mean,
shows that your documentary was a threat to the hustle. You
big
bas-
time.
you basically were shattering the con game that was letting
Exactly.
this go about, and really were ringing the alarm in a way that jeopardized her whole kind of
Right.
self-aggrandizement scheme.
Exactly. And that's why I couldn't just make the opposite film. I mean, HBO wanted me to collaborate with her, you know, like,
What?
yeah. And yeah. And
But
that's when
hey,
I was
can
just like,
again, to the point of how markets and money change everything, how much different financially would that have been for you had HBO and you collaborated with Laura Albert?
I have to say that the reality is I don't think it would even make a difference that much in my life. I mean, I wasn't. I mean, I it would have. It's so after the fact because I already put so much labor in. I mean, you're probably being paid like 3 cents an hour in the end. You know what I mean? It's like so crazy. But like they just pay you a director rate. You don't own the copyright. Like I own the
Really?
copyright. Yeah. You end up same with A&E. They probably own the copyright. You know what I mean?
Would it have changed where you sat on a hierarchy of important female voices in directing?
I think it might have. That would have been what I could have, like, capitalized. I probably still could have capitalized on that more, but I feel like I had, like, PTSD from the experience. Like, I think it again, to make a film and make a feature film, it really has to come from within to do it and push for it, and after making this and just having so many trials, like, I have been working on other projects, but, like, I didn't have it even in me. Like, I see how they hustle. Like, I see what people do to make documentaries for Netflix. They're doing like a 40, 50 interviews in a month. Like, I have 2 kids. That's just not my lifestyle to do 30 or 40 like interviews in a month. Like, there's a timeline. They have you jumping. You know what I mean? It's all about the turnaround. They're pushing films through and they're not done over time. And actually the best documentaries I think are usually done over time where you really watch a story unfold. And usually generally they are, a lot of them. But when they're being pumped out, um, it's just not that it wasn't really what I wanted to do anyway, because I had all the contacts. The film won a lot of awards. It did better than I could have imagined, quite frankly. And so and I was thankful for that. You know what I mean? I was really, really thankful because it was such a hard ride. You know what I mean?
Well, Marjorie, not to shameless plug my good friend and partner Jason Miles here. Oh, this is Revolution, but we make a pretty damn good video essay. I must tell
Oh,
you,
I want to check them out. I thought it was just something for this. I thought you were showing
Mhm.
a video essay for something. I
we
didn't
make a
quite.
pretty good video essay. They're about 15 minutes to a half hour long. They cover particular issues of history and politics that we like to talk about on the show. And if you get a chance to check any of them out, we would love to hear your feedback because
Cool.
you definitely made an impact with your documentary thus far, and we'd like to hear your expert opinion.
I would love to watch. I mean, that's great. I mean, video essays are really interesting. I think in general as a genre, like that's a really cool thing to tap into. That not a lot of people are tapping into. I don't think. I don't think there's as many people doing it.
Not with
You
a
know.
certain level of, I mean, there's some people that are doing some really good work, but there's a certain level of, I think we all agree,
Quality.
background research you have to do into this kind of stuff. You
Right.
can't just go, I hate JT LeRoy or I don't dig this lady, and then start doing your work. I mean, there's interviews you have to do. There's a lot of background reading you have to do. Um, so
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you really.
it's trying to get them out every month. To your point, early, but mass producing everything is going. I felt was watering down the product, so I actually stopped doing it for a while.
Every month. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. It's time consuming. Well, it's just there's the actual creation, but also just the way a story unfolds. Like I think someone was asking like where I think Marcus asked like where it was going. And that's really always the question, like does the story ever end, right? Like
Yeah.
you can keep following things forever.
I guess we have a question for you, Marjorie. That you want to say this M Tucson instead of
Sure. Sure, I'll read it. So we have a question from Jessica Sanlu. Uh, question for Marjorie. You said in the documentary that at one point JT said you couldn't film anymore because someone recognized him or her in person. Did you have did you have to sign anything to film initially?
That's a good question. No, and that's actually kind of what broke up our relationship in a sense. It was part of it. Like there was one of my only like part phone conversations when I was brought in to make the film. I was filming and I didn't even hadn't even talked to a lawyer, and then I did, and they said, "Oh, you should get something signed," but it doesn't matter because he's a public figure. He's a celebrity, and public
Right.
figures and celebrities, you don't really need anything to be signed. And that was the kind of thing that though Laura Albert was saying she didn't sign it, but they were public figures. She's put it all out there. She's put it out there over and over again, her story, in so many different ways, like her personal story too, that you don't have to get anything signed. And I didn't initially, yeah. So I didn't, but that was when that after that person on the Napa Valley shoot where I went for the New York Times ran into JT. That was a really weird thing because that was one of the things Laura Albert was careful. She said that if you saw JT LeRoy in public, you weren't supposed to acknowledge JT. You weren't supposed to say hello. And like I remember seeing JT Savannah Canoop on the bus, and being like, "Oh my gosh, there's JT," and not saying hello
On Muni?
on the bus. And then I didn't say hello, and then I just basically was sort of like, when I got home, I emailed JT and I said, "Oh, I saw you on the bus." This was after I'd already been warned not to say anything. And I got a response from some new secretary that's saying, "JT's in London right now. Um, so you didn't see JT." And I remember, to my credit at that time, just sort of responding, unless JT learned how to astral project, I know I saw JT on the bus right now. So like Laura went, to London, and, JT was not in London, obviously.
It's an oversight.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of those weird, cagey, strange moments. Like, one time I said to Astor Jeffrey Canoop, he was saying they live in the Tenderloin, and I was like, "Oh, like, where in the Tenderloin? I work in the Tenderloin." And then all of a sudden he's like, well, we're also staying in the Mission too. And I'm like, "Well, where in the
That's weird.
Tenderloin?"
Who does
Yeah,
that?
and then it was just, like, not really giving me an answer, so then you're like, "That's weird." And there'd be like, and then in retrospect, you add up all those very weird moments, but during it, you don't. You're just like, "Oh, that's weird, but whatever."
Can you let us know who is Jeffrey slash Astor, and do you feel he's a victim?
Oh, that's
Mm.
interesting question, right? That's a
Mm.
really interesting question, one I really, spent a lot of time. So Astor was, Laura Albert's partner for many, many years, and they raised a child together. They all came over originally, to my house and did watercolors. And interestingly enough, Astor Jeffrey Canoop's best friend was someone I was friends with and close with at one point too, which is just shows how overlapping the whole worlds were. Is Jeffrey Canoop a victim or not? I don't even know how to answer that. That's like always that question, right? People who are complicit in a fraud or a scandal or things much worse than this, right? Who possibly, are taken or brainwashed. I mean, I think, put it this way, I think Jeffrey Canoop's whole life would have went a completely different direction had he not met Laura Albert, while Laura Albert's life would have been is hers. So he got taken onto the ride. Um, and I don't think he would have made the choices he did, but he made his choices. He was definitely a participant, so it's hard to call him a victim per se, but I think he's not a sociopath full on.
Yeah,
Well,
you
he
can see it.
also made a
Mhm.
book too, right? Or wrote a
He
book.
tried. I mean, he's like such a funny part of it because he's into his music, promoting his music, he's into promoting a screenplay, back to like all of them. And it's like he comes from that culture. His father was a filmmaker. I mean, it's the hustle culture. So he's a hustler. But I don't think he's harmful. Like, I don't think he would have tried to, like, harm people, but he didn't. I don't think, to be honest to everyone, I don't think Savannah Canute and Jeffrey Canute really knew the full extent of Laura Albert's manipulations, like, on the phone. But, like, they obviously know when they go to the Deitch Gallery that we've gathered up a few hundred people to, like, adore this character who's a figment of Laura's imagination, and that's just weird. But that's an interesting question. A lot of people went along with it, like the whole band apparently knew, like people, so
How big did Thistle get?
no one took Thistle that seriously, which was really interesting. And Savannah Canute tried, or JT tried to promote Thistle quite a bit, but it never, the best it did was it was on a compilation for the same Ferzig did, the director did a doc. What's the name of that outsider musician? There's a documentary on him. Oh God, I'm just blanking out.
Sugar Man.
Kurt Cobain?
No, I love the Sugar Man documentary. It's not Kurt Cobain. It's a guy. He's an outsider artist. It's like if someone just Ferzig did a documentary. The guy who did the author documentary, did his first one on it, and he's a real outsider.
And
artist.
Shout out for licensing Swan's music.
Oh right, oh right. That 30 seconds was my only optioning. The rest of it was.
Oh really?
Yeah, the rest of the music's my partner and that he composed with some of the people he collaborates with.
I heard the Swans, and that's similar to the music I do.
Daniel Johnson, thank you. Jordan Dubin, yeah, Daniel Johnson.
Okay.
Right,
Okay, Devil and Daniel Johnson, that one?
Yes,
Yeah.
That was the movie. And there was a compilation that Thistle got on, and they did have Jerry Harrison from the Talking Heads produce them, but it never just seemed to like launch. It just never, for whatever, it was, I think, too poppy. Like, it wasn't dark enough. The music didn't kind of fit the the tone of JT. This music was kind of poppy and like, we're going to change the world, kind of happy music.
She's almost I feel that she's a fake punk in certain aspects, because it seems like in her own words, her relationship to punk music was peripheral through a racist skinhead, which was really interesting.
Right.
It's downplayed tremendously in the whole thing.
Yeah, that was, I mean, there was like a lot of information. Like, she was like, I'm not such a punk, but what's that? She was just trying to say it was all sexist. Like, she'll just turn it all around. Like I'm saying, she was just saying the skinheads, like she hung out with the skinheads and they would like, beat up, fags too. I mean, like, it's all very, it was always that like JT was special. JT wouldn't be beat up, or JT, what I mean? It was always JT transcending things, But I'm trying to think of the guy. Ian, what's the guy, the straight edge punk guy? Ian. Is it Ian?
Ian, oh God. I almost said Curtis, but that's a different Ian.
But anyway, she's saying he was sexist, like the punk scene was sexist.
Yeah, Minor Threat, Discord Records, Ian. I can't think of his last name.
But anyway, she has a whole thing in that same footage at the end that was at the Strand. She was going off on, it's almost like an excuse, like she, again, as a feminist, as a punk feminist, this is all part of this like punk act,
She co-opted Vivienne Westwood's entire look.
Some of
her backstory. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Vivienne Westwood did give like or pose or something with JT, or she wore Vivienne Westwood, I believe. I learned all about these fashion brands I had never heard of.
Well, can you speak more to the fashion aspect of it, MT? Because I think that really is important, as the character of JT is really blowing up and becoming a superstar. Right.
They were a superstar in the fashion industry as well. Just the higher echelons. I could see them just sort of adopting this person. Like, you told me this person does this and they're really cool. Cool. Bring him to the shoot.
Like Marc Jacobs, right? And all this, right? It was all this. It was definitely Well, it goes back to the whole thing about imaging, right? Like, and what I was saying with the surrealists, like it was all this just lots of photos and so forth. And I remember just wondering, God, like how it made sense that it was a team effort. It wasn't just JT, because how could JT be doing the fashion, writing the books, doing the music? I mean, that is someone then who just doesn't sleep, like to have that
Right.
much output going on. So when it all did come out, I was like, "Oh, of course," because like Savannah Canoe, I don't think she's interested in it then, but she had her own fashion line. Like she launched right away, launched when this came out, launched into, and the Chronicle had a huge photo of her launching her fashion line, and that's again back to that point, like we were making about the book and trying to write a book. I mean, there's all sorts of really legitimate and hardworking fashion lines in San Francisco of hardworking people who don't get big photo spreads,
Right.
and they didn't create frauds. Or and then so um, that's what's so sad about it, right? Like that's where again, just typical and sad.
In terms of the image, they were pulling on Andy Warhol imagery in terms of
Right, right,
how JT looked, and I wrote in my notes during the documentary, obvious Andy is obvious. Like,
right.
why wouldn't that be something that would make people think, hey, maybe this person is a fraud or manipulative?
Well, the
You know,
accent. Okay, so you actually met quote unquote Speedy, Emily, and quote unquote JT, right,
right.
Marjorie? What was your take when you heard that accent? Were you like, dude, this sounds fake as hell?
I had the same reaction just tons of people had. Like I first met JT down in LA, at that
Speaking of fake.
at the bookstore, and I had been prepped a lot, like to meet, like to do this, not to give eye contact, not to touch JT. And then I went upstairs to like put away my camera bags and stuff, like just somewhere safe because I didn't want to leave them down. And everyone's like, "Don't go up there. JT is up there." And I'm like, "I'm gonna go up there, and I don't care if JT. I'm just getting rid of my camera bag, right?" And when I got up there was like JT, Savannah Canoop sitting by themselves, and JT gave me this like super warm smile with eye contact, and I was like, "That is so weird." Like, and then I'm like, "Oh, maybe they're healing." You know what I mean? Like they're here now and they're healing. So, but Emily Speedy was the one who did all the interaction. And I came in out of nowhere, really, because I was just pulled in by a friend of a friend who's a major photographer in LA. And she pulled me in and I was there. And so Speedy Emily was kind of like, "Who are you?" And I was like, and I knew that like Speedy was, so I was trying to be pleasant to Speedy Emily just because, the way everyone was, because you're trying to do this documentary on JT, but she was odd and she was just really controlling and then wanting me to shoot pictures of the Thistle band and just like it just seemed really strange. But again, I'm stretched wide. I've been living in San Francisco a long time. I've been working with people with mental illnesses. Like, I don't want to say anything goes, but like people acting odd or abnormal has became particularly then quasi normal. You know what I mean? So
Mhm, mhm.
I didn't think much of it. I was like, "Oh, they seem super San Francisco." That's all I thought, like the way they were dressed. And quite honestly, compared to LA, it seemed a little refreshing. Like I was sort of like, here's Stephen Jenkins and these people who are just much more, let's say,
Less flashy.
normcore. Yeah, yeah. Like it's all really normal, sort of more mainstream. And then we had these like kind of freaks from San Francisco. So I was glad to kind of jump into the freak zone.
Did you want to ask him? Because you wrote some really good questions, MT. I want to make sure you get them all out before we sign off.
Sure. Well, watching the documentary also reminded me of Elizabeth Holmes
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
her Theranos scam.
Yep.
I I was in it. I mean, I didn't give her money, obviously, right? She needed more than my $7, but she had scammed a lot of people. A lot of people who were supposed to be, titans of industry and who knew what they
Exactly.
were doing. And I came across this interesting thing that mentioned her relationship with these older men. It
Oh,
reminded
wow.
me of
Oh,
JT
yeah. Yep.
and
Yep.
the older men in the documentary. And they said that
Mhm.
it wasn't really exactly a sexual thing, that she managed to occupy a space in between daughter and lover.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I
That's
thought that
real.
about JT. There was definitely a
No, I agree. I think
yeah.
that's really an interesting. I mean, yeah, there. I mean, that's a really interesting, and that's what Bruce Benderson in the documentary. I mean, I was amazed at some of the honesty of these men. Like, I
Hmm.
wasn't put off by them really. I just felt like, wow, they're so honest. Like, could I be this honest? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if I'm this honest because they were really. I really
Yeah.
mean it. Like, I was just like, oh wow, because like I had to think about what my motivations were. Why did I get pulled in? And like, you have to you go through all those thoughts. And it certainly wasn't to have sex with JT. I can tell you that that was not one of my motivations. But
Hmm.
he was really owning that it was it like the emotional needs, whether it's lover. I actually did interview a cult psychologist, and I do really, I mean, we think that we couldn't get pulled in. Like everyone thinks that they won't join a cult or get pulled in. But the truth is we really all do. And that's what I mean. I think with this group, it was like, it's Tom Waits, it's Lou Reed. I mean, it's like, it's John Waters. I mean, these are like kind of like people whose whole shtick is being like dark and
Tastemakers of the
perverse.
counterculture.
Right. Like, yeah, like these tastemakers, kind of this perverse chic kind of stuff that they've been doing forever. And they got pulled in. And I think the underlying thing is our we all have the same emotions. We all can get emotionally manipulated, particularly people, and this is what the cult psychologist said, through transitions. Like, we're all more lonely than we want to admit, and we're there's risk with that because again, capitalism in our culture has isolated people so properly, so people who just are wealthy even, or live in these huge houses, and it's not any better. Like I'm in a rent controlled apartment, 2 bedroom. It's been 4 of us, but it's cozy. And I grew up in a suburb of New York, and I've seen the alienation. I've seen the dysfunction there. And it's nothing I ever wanted to return to. I'm not taking out a violin for myself, but people are not well there. Again, like people are not well down at the financial industry either. I think that's like anytime you're being put in a position of having to exploit, you're not well. I mean, who wants, or like rapists, they're not well, right? Like if you're raping people, that's sickness.
Yeah.
But it gets very distorted because our culture is based on that. I mean, that's what I realized with the producing. Like that's what's going to get rewarded are the people who do exploit over and over and over and
It's
over
a
again.
weird constant cycle, right? Like these older people that she went to, like Lou Reed was done by the 90s. No one really
Right,
cared about
right.
anything he was saying. You could say the same thing. There was some Tom Waits, like how is a 15-year-old born in 80 even going to know who the hell Tom Waits is? But what's
Right,
interesting
right, exactly.
also too, what we're missing is the fact that when you have a con of this kind, you need to go reach out for these old iconic uh, uh, avatars of the counterculture,
Right.
because the original ones are gone. You can't get Hendrix. You're not going to go reach out to Charles Manson, but you're going to reach out to Tom Waits and Lou Reed, because they're very acceptable at this, especially at this point in their lives,
Right.
symbols of some sort of rebellion. And it's almost the symbols of a senseless rebellion, which to me speaks to this era that this comes out in, because it's a very apolitical time.
Right.
There's no politics whatsoever in these stories. So I want to just say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you
This is
for your
wonderful what you're doing here.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming out, Marjorie. Really appreciated it. Learned a lot from watching your documentary and reading your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. No, seriously, this was really interesting. Good to remember all of it, right?
And again, I'm so glad we met via the interwebs. They are.
I know, right? It's Brooke Jenkins. I think me and
Yes.
we're
Yes.
both on that Brooke Jenkins.
She's
talk
sitting
about
here. She's been sitting here yelling things the whole time.
yeah.
You guys can't hear because luckily my microphone only goes in one direction. But if
Yeah.
it was one like Pascal has, you'd hear. Tell her about the other thing about she forgot. Tell her about how JT lied about this. Lie. That's all I can hear.
She's great. That's good. Well, okay. Well, yeah. Happy birthday. Please
All right.
on you. Okay. Have a good one. Have a great day. Enjoy your day.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Take care. And that was Marjorie Strum.
Still struggling with this. Like,
I have to. I'm also stressed, so I have to. I will apologize on air. Marcus wasn't just mad because of the conversation. I muted him.
Oh, you did a preemptive mute?
Muted him. That's why he. That was a dick move, and we are going to talk. And by talk, I mean I'm going to sit there and let him scold me.
Marcus, and y'all do what y'all have to do.
yeah, throw it out.
It happens.
No.
It happens. I know him in real life, so I'd rather do it virtually than personally.
Because he's big enough to beat your ass.
He is.
Because you're not 5'10".
He's quicker than you think with that size. And the last time I'm trying to do is catch them hands. They're big.
You got the really light dreadlocks.
You can stick a move with those.
Yeah. Look. I'm not trying to have all the Jamaican come out in an ass whoop. That boy tried to silence me.
Yes, the chat and the audience loves Marcus. We need Marcus for our Saturdays. The show Saturdays are not the same without Marcus.
We love Marcus.
Yeah.
And Winston.
The last thing I need right now is to see Marcus in DC and have him slap the taste out of my mouth with them big ass banana hands.
Yes. He is a giant.
Why they gotta be banana hands though?
Because he's a big Negro. He knew he had banana hands when he had a big ass family. He's sitting there right now adding all these to the list of things. And that's
You have to say that about bananas? Check. Talking about machetes? Check. Yeah, I brought up machetes.
Jamaican accent shit.
Right.
In Jamaica, they call a machete a cutlass.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get a cutlass up the ass because Marcus is mad. Have my butthole looking like JT's fucking real.
Damn.
Anyway.
We coming for you, nigga.
That is not how I'm trying to live my life with a bunch of ex-veterans doing fucking covert ops to whoop my ass.
That's right, man. You better get it straight. Marcus knows how to shoot
right with the Lord right now.
Marcus knows how to shoot a couple of guns.
Jason doesn't want to get Gaddafi. Exactly. I do not. Have Marcus's homeboys get me like fucking Rushdie. I'm not trying to have it. No. Yeah. So we're gonna finish this show. Thank you so much, Pascal and Toussaint. Pascal will have the night off Tuesday, as we'll be discussing the Woodstock 99 piece that is coming out in Sublation Monday with musician and personal friend Pasquale Romero, where I will constantly call him Pascal, probably for a good hour and a half.
You're producing the Mile with me, or is it going to be our other co-producers?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, of course.
All right, very good.
It's a team thing. Brother. It's all the time me, and it's all the time you.
Well, all right. I appreciated the show today. This was good.
Happy birthday again.
Happy birthday again.
Thank you, both of you.
Trying to get yourself killed the day after your birthday. Okay.
I'm laughing now because I'm not going to be laughing in like 3 minutes.
No, you won't.
I'm just going to sit here and be like,
What the Rosclot, boy? Yep, he's going
Mhm.
after you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's all it's gonna be is like this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's true. I do be doing that. Yeah,
I can't say anything. But,
you're right.
You know who does that to me too? MT.
What?
I have to. Sometimes she starts talking, and it's so true. I gotta go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I'm getting scolded, it's like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you did drop the baby. Did.
Yeah, I just gotta go. Mm-hmm. Me and Pascal can just holler for a minute, and it's fine. But everybody else is like.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Pascal doesn't seem like
First of
he
all,
gets a step
Pascal's
wrong.
just loud. He talks loud in general.
He talks loud.
Except when we're checking a mic. Except when we're checking a mic. He's got the coolest radio voice in the goddamn world. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everyone has jokes. Everyone has jokes. Jokes. They have jokes. They do.
Look, this is all it's gonna be. Mm-hmm. I'm getting ready right now just to take this verbal ass whooping because the physical one would be real. It'd be one of those, hey man, rule book says I gotta punch you.
I gotta punch you. Not in the face. Not in the face.
Like what? It's like, oh, whatever is coming, it's gonna hurt because you punch it down with all that strength and size, and
Because you're not 5'10". Yeah,
because
that's
you're
true.
athletic. Like, oh, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad y'all are gonna work it out. That's
Yes.
good.
Well, you know, look, man, I'm very difficult, and I'm gonna flinch at the words. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. The link in the description to, almost said Laura, to Marjorie's documentary is right there. You can watch it. Let us know what you think. Leave a comment. If you're listening to this on the audio only, leave a comment on what you think about the documentaries. Go watch Laura Albert's documentary as well, because again, when you watch hers, there's a lot of, I didn't send you guys the link to hers, but there's a lot of missing points, and it's non-linear. It's all over the place. And at the end, Laura Albert goes, what did they think it was? It was always a fiction book.
Mm.
And she leaves out a lot of that dirty talk that she did to all those writers. You know what we left out? One very important thing that we left out. And I don't know if it's not a big deal in Marjorie's documentary, but the JT LeRoy character that Laura creates is saying that she's talking to these writers in a bathroom where all these junkies are shooting up. And she goes, I can send you my work right now. One of my Johns bought me a fax machine. And I'm like, what shitty bathroom are you shooting up in with a phone line in it and an outlet?
Well, I'm so glad JT has that outlet that he can get his work out through this fax machine in this dope bathroom.
Everybody's shooting up around him, and he's like, don't mind me, I'm gonna plug in my fax machine.
He claimed to have HIV as well, which was, I felt, really sinister.
Yes, said they had HIV, and then that it went away. Said got the Magic Johnson treatment.
That's right. And people were like, yeah, that's great. You look great today. Love that outfit.
Yes, I want to see that scene in the film. The junkies around the fact. My John, I said, I'll let you do whatever you want as long as I can get a fax machine that has some sort of magical hookup in 1993 to this thing called a cellular phone.
And I definitely know how to use a fax machine, and I definitely know they exist.
I keep writing about not being able to read and being born in a truck stop with a mom that can't read. She's also in a truck stop. But technology is just my thing. I program VCRs for my Johns as well because they tend to be of an older group of men.
Fix the time on the microwave for them. It's just like, wait a minute, what?
Pascal is like,
Why are you doing like a voice that's like Strum at like a crack house? I mean, like,
That was the voice. That was the voice that he used. Can't believe how many times he said he can't read. I can't even hear, like,
yeah. Anyway, man, I'm gonna get some breakfast.
wait, Marjorie said that the Amazon took her documentary down and she has the correct link. She's sending it to me right now. Hold, I'm going to put it in the chat.
okay, cool.
And for the audio only listeners, it'll be in the description for the audio only. So I apologize for that. Marjorie sending me the new link. Give me 1 second. My computer moves slow, much like JT's fax machine connection. It was magical. Cellular phone. It was one of those big ones that kind of had a base in it that you would only see Cuban drug dealers use and things like Miami Vice.
Oh,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like Fire Festival was a person.
What did you say? Fry Festival was a person. Who
Yep.
said that? You said that?
Me, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Everything that woman did was so fucking stupid. Like even her fake British accent sounded like this. It was all loud, like Robin Leach describing some rich asshole's yacht.
Please, sir, can I have some more? It was very like Oliver Twisty.
Spotty.
Spotty.
She's a proper lady.
Mater, where's Peter? Tell Peter the mater.
I'm like, she's hanging out with Bono. I was like, them motherfucker's from Ireland. You're gonna tell me he doesn't know any British people? Or
The
does he just
UK has so many accents. Yes, it's so hard to keep track.
Or is it like the way people treat Madonna for that like 10 years that she talked with that weird accent where she was kind of British but not really? It's like, aren't you from Detroit? Is that what it was when she was like, JT's got this manager. I think she might be on the spectrum, but
Like people on the spectrum. Wow.
what the fuck was? No one took that woman. They all took her seriously.
Isn't it?
Isn't it? When, you know what her accent sounded like when Jean Bajlan tries to have a country accent.
Oh, yeah.
When Jean Bajlan does his country accent of the people that he is around, that's what the JT LeRoy accent sounded like.
She had the what's the name? The guy in Mary Poppins. She had that.
Dick Van Dyke.
She had the Dick Van Dyke chimney sweep type joint.
God damn. God damn chimneys.
He will never live that down.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Governor.
Got a Jerry story about a little boy prostitute. Like, what a horrible person. Like, seriously,
Yeah.
also, guys, watch Marjorie's documentary, because one thing that Laura's documentary doesn't get into at all is the way that actually, and this is what I found very, very heartbreaking, is that the LGBTQ community in San Francisco really got behind JT because they felt JT was a voice for them and the exploitation that they deal with on a daily basis. And they even had made a statement about it. And then when it all came out that it was fake, a lot of people also too stopped their support for that community en masse. So really horrible things this woman did. You know, we're literally making fun of her because she deserves to be made fun of. And I did not put her name originally. It took me like 20 minutes to write this title up again because I wanted to write Laura Albert, but because Marjorie was like, no, anytime her name comes up, she does like a search. And she'll take shit down. So the last thing I want to deal with is some, Cockney Southerner calling me up.
Southerner from the turn of the century.
The turn of the century Cockney Southerner. So thank you guys. And I'll see you guys Tuesday, and you'll see these people Wednesday. Not MT.
You'll never see me.
You'll never see me.
She's coming to the Mamo.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll be there. It should be on the phones too. Because I'm a real person, not like JT or Amy Therese. You won't see me, but I am a real person.
you should screen all the calls like JT
No. We gotta wrap it up, Jason.
The accent was so bad.